All right, guys, welcome back for part 2 of the Russian Revolution. This one won't be a full 15 minutes. This one will be pretty quick. When last we left off, we had all the tensions. Check out video number 1 to learn more about that. Here we are in number 2. So the guy on your left is Kerensky. The guy on your right is Lenin. We haven't talked a lot about Lenin, so let's delve into him a little bit more, who he is and why he matters. So the October Revolution is the second part of the revolutionary landscape, number 1 being the February Revolution, which really took place in March and toppled the monarchy. Now, there was all these different workers' councils, these Soviets set up. There was this provisional government, the Duma, led by Kerensky. This government was trying to continue to prosecute the war. They're reaching out to the United States. They're trying to get help becoming a full-fledged democratic state. They're trying to honor the commitments. The Kerensky government is trying to honor the commitments of the Tsarist government. And then into this soup, this sludge of revolution comes a disruptor. And we've seen people like this before. Think of Marat and Robespierre into the French Revolution and the effect that they both had in turning their revolution into something way more radical. And Lenin, the guy here on your screen, is going to be very, very similar. Now, he's living in Switzerland at the onset of the war, and he has been banished by the Tsarist government for being a radical. Now, he is a communist. He's going to take Marx's ideas of radical socialism and he wants to implement them into Russia. And so essentially what ends up happening is the German commander, this guy Ludendorff, takes Lenin. He puts him into the sealed train. He spirits Lenin over the borders of Germany, where he's he's not even let out because they're so worried that if he gets out, his ideas are going to be like a plague bacillus, or here we are in quarantined state. His ideas are going to infect the other people around him just by coming into contact. And so he's put onto this train, he's distanced from everybody else, and he's spirited into Petrograd, St. Petersburg, Leningrad, depends on the time or the year for that city's name. But anyway, he shows up and he immediately gets to work, right? And he's going to try to infiltrate not the Duma, he wants to get into these Soviets, these worker councils, right? These people who are much, much more inclined to take up his ideas because of all of their anger. Again, go back and look at video number 1 for a little bit more on the disadvantaged groups of Russia. So anyway, Lenin sets up this group, the Bolsheviks, right? These radical communists, and he's going to start to seize power away from the Kerensky government, right? Peace, land, and bread, which if you go back and look at the early ideas of the February Revolution, or what people were angry about in 1905, the Bloody Sunday event, this is going to play really, really well with the Russian peasantry and the population, right? And he basically takes all these Soviets, these worker councils and soldier councils, and he gets them under one flag, right? This red flag of communism. But the problem with him is that he's going to be much more violent. People like Kerensky and contemporaries will say, there's not going to be a lot of space or distance between the way that Lenin runs the state and the way that the Tsar ran the state. These were just autocratic, totalitarian regimes, and Lenin's going to be no different, because in order for his revolution to actually work, he's going to have to stamp out huge sections of the Russian population, right? He's essentially going to go bottom up, whereas the Tsar was going top down. But it doesn't matter. He's still going to be an absolutist. He's still going to be a totalitarian. And so from Kerensky's standpoint, and for the standpoint of many of the democratic, freedom-loving countries of Western Europe, this is a problem, right? Because not only is communism anti-capitalistic in an economic sense, but from a democratic sense, right, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of liberalization of thought or ideas. This just seems to be the status quo, just in a different package, right? Just rebranding, so to speak, right? And so the issue here between Kerensky and Lenin becomes democratic ideals and values. Lenin wants to go all in on communism. Kerensky wants to go all in on democracy and capitalism and make a country just like the United States. Again, he's going to send out messages to Woodrow Wilson saying, hey, man, can you teach us how to do this? Because we want to be more like you. Lenin says, we want to be like something that no one's ever seen before. So there's this revolution and civil war that takes place in October between the whites. These are going to be the Kerensky-led people, and the reds. And at the same time as this civil war is taking place and starting to break out all across Russia, you've also got World War I going on, right? So you've got this like toxic soup. And from the German standpoint, this is why they sent Lenin in. They figured this could be the knockout punch. They didn't have to commit any of their soldiers, any of their military power. They can turn around, they can go look west at the British and the French and try to knock the British and the French out before the Americans fully get into the war. This moment in 1917 seems to be the moment they've been waiting for the last 3 years of combat. And the revolution at first seems to really favor the Germans, right? Because all of the energy and all of what's taken place inside of Russia starts to suck up resources. Soldiers don't want to fight. They want to get involved with their own cause. And so early on, the Germans seem to be successful. Now, from the Russian perspective, as you can see me clicking off here on the screen, there's going to be this really big hope for change, but that change moment doesn't really seem like it's going to like fully settle in, right? Because the prosecution of the war seems to be carrying on. So what do the communists do? Well, they just give up a ton of territory. They give up a ton of resources and money over to the Germans. From Lenin's perspective, this is going to be a good move because hey, we'll just get all that territory back. From Kerensky's perspective, in terms of trying to hang on to any sort of power, this weakens the Russian state, but he's got to also focus, right? And so in 1917, 1918, like the jury is way still out on who's going to win this war, who's going to like be able to seize power in Russia. But it seems like the prudent move is to get out of the war. So this World War I, that is. The Civil War, that's a whole different story, right? So you got the Reds, you got the Whites, you got the people who are going to try to reinstall the Tsar, right? This leads to that horrible massacre out in Siberia of the royal family, where the royal family is taken to a basement and lined up and shot and executed, thus ensuring that there's going to be no more royals. And then you've got this like driving move towards revolution, right? And then there's this other set of problems that takes place after the revolution really starts to kick in. You know, just again, take an analogy from right now. When you have disruption inside of an economy, what tends to happen is you have economic downturn. Now, we're talking about a virus in our contemporary society. And I guess Ludendorff thought that the ideas of Lenin were going to be a virus. You see the Russians economically collapse, right? And this opens up this like really interesting issue inside of the Russian Revolution, which is now, are you going to be communist? Because if you're going to be communist, you have a long way to go to creating a communist utopian society. So how are you going to provide for the needs of the people? How are you going to create a stronger state? How are you going to hold the enemies at bay? And if you're a democratic capitalist like the whites, like this, all of this disruption is just ruining the markets. And now you're looking at a like prolonged depressed state, right? A Great Depression before the Great Depression. And so overall, the revolution seems to be like really problematic for everybody involved. And so Lenin does what he thinks is going to be best. He is going to decide to enact some marginally capitalistic democratic reforms as he strengthens and coalesces his power so that he can maintain total control within his state. At the same time, though, you've got this really big problem if you're a communist, which is Lenin has totally betrayed the revolution. But it works, and the revolution from the communist perspective is successful because of the like quasi-capitalistic communist mind meld that takes place inside of the economy, which allows for some recovery, which strengthens the communist side and leads to the end of the Kerensky government and the whites, and the communist revolution really fully takes hold. Inside of the communist revolution, though, this creates a schism, and you have on one side Trotsky. Trotsky's this like full-on ideologue. He's like fully into the writings of Marx. He is a true believer, right? If this is a band, Lenin's the frontman, and then you've got Trotsky. He's ripping off these mad communist licks on the guitar, like I've used a lot of band metaphors lately, but I mean it really, really works here. And then you've got all these other apartics, and these guys are like the driving sort of like rhythmic anchor of the revolution, all these people in the Soviets, right? So that's that bass rhythm section. And then you've got this other guy that I mentioned in video number 1, Stalin, right? And he grows up as a revolutionary, as a thug. He's a bank robber before he becomes part of the communist movement. He's kind of just in this background place, but he slowly, through the course of the Civil War, gains more and more and more and more power, right? And he becomes this like driving drumbeat, dun, 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 right? Kind of like when we talked about Rasputin, and this matters. This matters and is important. And part of the reason I love the band analogy for this group of revolutionaries, because in rock and roll, the old maxim is your band is only as good as your drummer, right? And so Stalin, right, the man of steel, this moniker he gives himself, Stalin meaning steel, right? He says to himself, like, listen, I can take over the revolution. I am the true heartbeat of this revolution. I just need an opening, right? And when Lenin has a stroke, an opening is created, right? And so it's Trotsky versus Lenin, and it's like not certain who's going to win out through the course of the 1920s, as Lenin, like after a series of strokes, is on his deathbed, and there's no real heir apparent to the revolution. Who's going to take over? And the drummer wins out, and you need a good drummer, right? Dun, 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 dun. And so Trotsky goes on the run. He's in Mexico City, and what should happen to Trotsky? He's assassinated by Stalin. He gets an ice pick in the back of the head, and he dies on the Mexican streets. And the power is moved into Stalin's camp. And Stalin, looking at what Lenin did, says, like, I don't need to be a pure communist. I just need to be in power, right? And so he takes all the totalitarian leanings of Lenin, and he puts those into place. And he says, listen, I'll appease all the apartics, like the bass players and everybody else who's still in the band, who's like, hey, man, we got a new front man. We can't have a drummer in front. Sorry, Eagles, but it just does not work. And he basically starts to put in a new set of communist reforms, right? So to summarize the video, or to the lecture video, I guess, that I'm creating right now, I've got linked down here on this slide, and I'll put it in Google Classroom, the Russian Revolution video that John Green made in Crash Course. This will be European history, so it's a little bit slower version of John Green, but a way more informative version of John Green. Make sure you check out these 2 questions. Did conditions improve for the Russian people? Why or why not? That's, of course, asking about the revolution. And was life under the Bolsheviks that much better than life under Nicholas II? Right. So this web, the video and the link will be uploaded into Google Classroom, and this slideshow will also be posted, so you can grab that link in multiple different ways, along with a reading. This will be the longest series of video lectures, I guess, because I told some story stuff there. We're going to come in right around 14 minutes. But from here on out, look for 15-minute hyper-intensive crash coursey type videos along with supplemental materials. Again, distance learning is here to stay, at least for the time being. All right, socially distance yourself. Don't talk to anybody else. No high fives. Use your elbows. Make your own bread. It's a great opportunity to add some skills. All right, check out some other resources here for you guys, because we're going to cite our sources along the way as much as possible. Thanks for tuning in to video number 2 of the Russian Revolution. Appreciate your time. Have a good one.